Welcome to Coffee Commerce. My name is Sean Raymond, and I'm the grandson of a coffee farmer from Guyana, South America. On Coffee Commerce, we talk about the stories behind coffee as they relate to society, culture, and business. We started our last episode with discussing the French captain Mathieu Gabriel de Clou, who in 1723 was a naval officer who was in charge of an infantry in Martinique, and how he had aspirations to bring back coffee seedlings from the coffee plant of King Louis XIV's royal garden, which was originally a gift from the Dutch to Louis. The king flatly denied the request. The story went that de Clou stole a seedling and carried it from the harsh trip to the West Indies, sharing his water ration even with the plant, and taking great care to preserve the seedling. The coffee plant grew and flourished in the West Indies. Needless to say, the French were very protective of their coffee fortunes. We also discussed the Dutch and their trade empire, and we ended up in the Guianas of South America. There are technically three Guianas. There's Dutch Guyana, which became known as Suriname, British Guyana, which after its independence from Britain became known simply as Guyana, and also French Guyana. It should be noted that the Dutch were throughout this entire region and left behind possessions, influence, and even names of communities still to this day in all of the Guyanas. Let's start with French Guyana, where our story continues. By the 1700s, the Dutch had finally mastered the coffee plantation in their colonies and were renowned coffee traders. Because it was so lucrative, it became a very highly regulated commodity. The Dutch did not want the cultivation of coffee to fall into the wrong hands, the hands of their competitors, that is. At first, they were quite successful at guarding their trade. Let's start in Suriname, where we left off last. In 1719, the coffee plants were smuggled out of Suriname and brought to French Guyana, where the coffee plant was cultivated and not surprisingly flourished due to similar environmental factors in both of the Guyanas. Then something happened in 1727, which is where the story gets interesting. A borderland dispute arose between French Guyana and Dutch Guyana. To settle the matter, the King of Portugal offered to send one of his noblemen to mediate. Lieutenant Colonel Francisco de Melo Palheta of the Brazilian army was dispatched by the King of Portugal to French Guyana. But in addition to the land dispute matter, his mission was to obtain coffee seeds and to bring them back to the Portuguese colony of Brazil. In fact, some may say that the land dispute was more of a clever ploy for the true mission, smuggle back to Brazil the coveted prize of coffee seeds. He arrived in Guyana, intent on smuggling out the coveted coffee plants, but they were closely guarded. The governor of Guyana, Claude Gillet d'Orvilla, would have likely been forbidden by the King of France to gift such a plant. Coffee would not be seen as something that should even be mentioned for fear that it would draw suspicion to Palheta's mission. In fact, the French colony had the coffee industry well guarded and secured. So rather than focusing on the traditional diplomatic affairs around coffee, Palheta set his eyes on the governor of Cayenne's wife, Madame Marie-Claude de Vic de Pontebeau. By the way, Cayenne is the same cayenne where the pepper would get its name from. That's a different story. Palheta was quite charming and managed to persuade her to help him with his mission. So taken was the governor's wife with Palheta that she came up with a plan to get him his coffee. At the close of the banquet, on the last night when Palheta was in town, she handed him a bouquet of flowers that contained and concealed the coffee seedlings. So it was that Francesco de Melo Paletta planted the first coffee tree smuggled from French Guiana to Brazil in the state of Para in 1727, and the coffee seed and the coffee plants spread from there. Back to Declue for a minute. He would end up dying in Paris at the age of 88 after serving as governor for the Antilles. He eventually would become honored by the King of France, although not Louis XIV, but one of his successors. Poems and songs are written about Declue's glorious coffee exploits, and even a botanical garden in Martinique would have his name bear on it. Same with Paletta in Brazil. He became a local hero. This seems to be a common theme in the history of coffee. One country or group tries to protect their coffee fortunes, which does seem to have initial success before others seem to successfully break the monopoly, usually using espionage or smuggling tactics. It also appears that with each successive coffee smuggling mission, the new coffee seedling owners become more successful than the previous, but coffee seems to continue to prosper more and more. What is about to happen in Brazil is nothing less than remarkable, but that's another story for another cup of coffee. Thank you.